Okay, it's 10 o'clock and about 30 seconds, so I think it's time for us to begin. Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Georgescu, and as the director of the Urban Climate Research Center, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you all to the third annual UCRC Distinguished Webinar. Technically, it's the fourth such event that we've had. Our first year, we got a little bit overzealous and held one of these events during both the spring and the fall semester. We've settled into a more sustainable rhythm, as one would expect from ASU. One such event every spring semester. It's become a bit of a tradition here at ASU, as is evidenced by the number of registrants. We are super, super excited. We're well in excess of 100 registrants, and I know people are still coming in as we speak. And quite honestly, this serves as a great excuse to nerd out about urban environments with friends and colleagues, talk about trees and adaptation and mitigation, and all of those good things that really deal with urban resilience. Each year, this webinar gives us a chance to hear from thought leaders tackling big questions at the intersection of urban environments, ranging from water to energy, and as I mentioned previously, more broadly to just urban resilience and all of its multifaceted ways. This time we've upped the ante a little bit. Instead of just one distinguished speaker, we've assembled a panel, because when it comes to cities and climate, no one has all the answers. And the idea here is that we might just crowdsource some wisdom that we can take back to those that make decisions. Our focus today is on a simple but very powerful tool for urban adaptation: trees. Those leafy giants that provide shade and reduce exposure to heat and sometimes even clean the air, co-benefits. That's right. Beyond their aesthetic and maybe poetic appeal, trees are increasingly being recognized as critical infrastructure part of urban environments, part of cities, helping cities cope with rising temperatures, stormwater challenges, thermal inequities. And today's panel will dig into the how and why and where trees can be a part of a resilient urban future. We're especially pleased to be joined by Dr. David Hondula, Director of Phoenix's Office of Heat Response and Mitigation, often referred to as the city's heat czar, which is simultaneously probably the coolest and the hottest job title in government. Dr. Hondula's work represents a new frontier in urban climate leadership, blending science policy and direct community engagement in the fight against extreme heat. Finally, a quick word about the Urban Climate Research Center, the UCRC. Our mission is to deliver transformative scientific advancements in urban climate solutions for diverse urban communities and ecosystems globally, to foster research that's not only academically rigorous and at the frontiers of science, but also useful. Research that speaks to the lived realities of urban residents and helps to shape better futures. We're proud to host this annual event as part of the UCRC mission, and we're thrilled to have all of you here with us today. Without any further delay, I would like to pass the digital baton to Dr. Hondula. Dave, please.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks to you and the UCRC and geography team for organizing. Matt, you asked me to confirm that we are indeed recording, so let's be sure that we're in good shape there before we proceed any further. Perfect. We get a thumbs up. And yeah, it's an honor to be here with colleagues representing urban forestry and climate adaptation issues more broadly. We'll hear from them more in a moment, but we'll just get a brief wave hello from Lora, Phoenix, Stephen with Mesa, and Jeff representing the nursery industry, which we're so excited to have that complementary perspective here. Matt, if you wouldn't mind turning on the couple of slides that we have to set the stage, and as Matt is getting the slides ready, for our audience today, about half of the responsibility for having a good dialogue falls on you, or I invite you to help us have a good dialogue. I've only prepared enough questions to get us to about 10:35 or so. So from there, this is going to be your and our stage together to see what interesting dialogue we can have. So please start thinking of your questions now. Matt, I can see the slides. They are not in presentation mode yet, if you care. Here are some of the questions I am hopeful that we may scratch the surface of a little bit today. With our our excellent panelists who are the practitioners. They are the implementers of this climate adaptation strategy that Matt introduced. I think we can hear up to the second assessment of the state of local to regional urban forestry issues. We can hear where we're headed, what's pushing us forward, and what's holding us back. And then today, of course, we have an interesting mix of practitioners and researchers convened together. So I'm hopeful that our practitioners may share some questions that they have for the research community that's assembled on our call today. But also, maybe our urban climate researchers have some questions that the practitioner community can help them answer as they're designing observational campaigns and experiments or parameterizing models. The people who are serving on our panel today can help us set those values, design those experiments, and design those studies. And just to help us set the stage a little bit more, Matt, if I could ask you to go forward to the next slide. Urban forestry and climate adaptation and the combination of the two is a huge topic in the literature today. When I was searching just yesterday, the keywords urban forestry, climate, heat, I think I found something like 20,000 peer-reviewed articles that were published on that topic last year. And I don't know if it's 10,000 or 30,000, but whatever the number is, it's a lot and way too much for any of us to keep up with. I looked for a couple recent review articles on urban forestry and climate adaptation. And of course, there are many studies that are based in the physical sciences and ecological sciences. But I was interested to learn that over the past few years, there's been increasing attention from scholars on the practice of urban forestry. Scholars are interviewing folks like Jeff, Lora, and Stephen, and their colleagues from all across the country to understand what the practice of implementation is like and how do we move that practice forward. So here's a couple of highlights from a cleverly titled paper published last year from the landscape architecture and urban planning community. The title of the paper was Beyond the Golden Shovel, Recommendations for Successful Urban Tree Planting Initiatives, recognizing that large-scale tree planting initiatives are really exploding all across the country. And this author, in their synthesis of many other papers, thought that there were 5 key pillars to successful initiatives. And I feel like, Laura, they resonate with at least the way we're trying to think about this in Phoenix, but I'm curious what the audience and our other panelists will think. Attention to funding, attention to what's appropriate for the place that we're in, attention to the people who are going to be interacting with these investments, benefiting from these investments, shaping these investments, having the right planting techniques and evaluation of those efforts over time to have an adaptive management cycle that moves us forward. This is one of the most recent assessments of the entirety of the literature on trying to guide urban forestry implementation. And Matt, one more recent review, this one just from a couple of months ago. A large team of authors, some of whom are based in the US and are quite prominent in the field. I think one of whom is even on the line with us today. So maybe we'll hear some more reaction. This review paper looked for different domains, different themes that represent challenges for moving urban forestry initiatives forward. And these authors, in their review of many other studies, came to identify 4 big themes of challenges. They saw tree supply and species selection as 2 of those big challenges. And we're so happy to have perspective from industry on the line today to ground those academic ideas, and also the tree life cycle, talking about the operational maintenance of these investments, as well as community engagement. So I see similar themes between these 2 different review articles, even though they approach the question a little bit differently. And Matt, I'm sure you can help us share the links to these papers with our audience that might be interested to engage further. So with that scene setting in place, I'd now like to invite the panelists to come forward. And Matt, I think we can turn off the screen share and we'll just get to enjoy each other's company here for the remainder of the hour. We have a great panel who, as I mentioned before, is really on the front line of implementing this strategy. in one of the most critical regions, I would argue, in the country or maybe in the world for implementing this strategy. And I'd like each of our panelists to introduce themselves. We'd love, I think it'd be beneficial for the community just to get to know what it is you do and how you got into that role. What was your path, where now the spotlight of our whole region is on the work you do day in and day out. And Stephen, maybe we can start with you over in Mesa, please. Just a couple of minutes. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, David. Happy birthday, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I see 51 participants. Yeah, really excited to be here. I fell into this industry as a lot of people accidentally do. I was in the ski industry. I studied at the University of Vermont, while very heavily focused on natural resource management and environmental science. I didn't really think much about it at that time. And I did an AmeriCorps position, and my first job out of undergrad, and I managed 50 acres in Vermont. And we had to keep it safe. It was a kids camp. So I learned to drop trees with an arborist. Never thought, 15 years later, I'd be in this role. I went into the ski industry. I was in Northern California during a very dry period. So it was really challenging up there for businesses, for my friends, for everyone. We just didn't get snow like we should have. I was kind of burnt out of doing that job and went into the Peace Corps, served in Peru in economic development. So I learned what it's like to really work for your community. And when I came back, pandemic hit. So using the Peace Corps scholarship, U of A has a really great program, the Coverdell Fellowship Program. They got my master's in public administration with heavy focus in public policy, and I had to bring service home. So that means 10 hours a week I had to work with a nonprofit organization or an agency in Tucson. And Tucson Clean and Beautiful, they had an open position. I remember interviewing with Katie and Gannon, the executive director there, and she gave me a shot. At that time, they had just not been awarded, but were recognized as Mayor Romero's tree planting arm in her Million Tree Initiative in the city of Tucson. And they had just hired the urban forest program manager there. So I've worked 2 years in the field with Tucson Clean and Beautiful. And then as part of my grad school internship, I had to work also in a city. And the city manager there said, we'd really love you to help Nicole with trees. So for a few years did that. And when this position opened up in Mesa, I applied. And we're doing very similar things here, just like in Phoenix, where we're really engaging the community, people first, to plant these trees, making sure we're planting the right trees. And to me, it's the small stories. We were just out planting the other day, and it's young homeowners who can't afford trees right now, and their yard is barren. They just bought this 1970s house and just hasn't had those updates that may be needed, and their air conditioned bill is just so great. So putting that tree in their front yard is going to make a huge difference. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Stephen, and an extra special thank you from me for the work you do. My parents are residents of Mesa, so they're benefiting from your work every day. Stephen, I think a question some people have is, where organizationally do all of these urban forestry leaders sit in local government? The governance of urban forestry and heat is a big topic right now. Could you just very briefly explain how you are positioned in the Mesa government, and then we'll go to Jeff next.
Sure, yes. City of Mesa, we have an environmental and sustainability department, and I report to our deputy director here. We oversee Mesa's unique. We have our own energy grid. So we have Mesa Electric Supply. So my director oversees our utility, and I report to him. So while may not have in other cities, you may report to like a public works manager or someone that has that tree care, arboriculture experience. Here it's a little different. I bring that experience, and he helps me guide the politics of Mesa.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Jeff, same introductory question to you. What is it that you do, and how did you wind up doing it?
Well, good morning, everybody. Jeff Grass. I work with Treeland Nurseries. We have our main location in Mesa. That's our retail hub, and where we work with a lot of landscapers. However, in Southeast Gilbert. I work at our growing farm. We've got 75 acres out here that we grow on a variety of trees and shrubs. I've been in the industry for, probably about 30 years at this point, since back in high school, even when I got my first start at working at the garden shop at Target, back when Target used to have a garden shop. And now I'm the current president of the Arizona Nursery Association. I've been serving on the board for about 8 years. My journey here, I started out at the U of A many years ago to actually become a psychology major. But about my third semester through, I decided that really wasn't for me. I'd been working at a garden shop for a couple of years, and that really was just interesting me. I've always liked being outside and hiking and just being in the desert. So that kind of just made the natural transition for me. So I shifted over to agriculture and horticulture. Graduated from there in 2001, and I've since worked a whole host of different jobs. Retail, I've worked in landscape. I spent a long time with Mountain States Wholesale, working both in the office in sales and then eventually in propagation. And now I find myself here for the last 2.5 years working at Treeland as a production manager. So it's for me, I've always liked getting my hands dirty and just being outside. I think we kind of all do. If you're here and you're interested in trees, you enjoy what they can bring to the discussion. And then working as a kind of greater whole with the, Nursery Association, that gives me the perspective of being able to see our industry as pretty much across the whole state, and where everybody works together. We all have a lot of the same problems and a lot of the same concerns and a lot of the same interests. And it's always good to put our heads together to try and be able to figure out solutions to problems, whether that's working with cities like City of Phoenix, City of Mesa, and all these others, or working directly with the state government and federal government. I know we've had recently a couple of bills have gone through that weren't exactly as inductive to being friendly for our urban shade environment. So we're trying to kind of work against that and work with legislators to educate them. Education is such a big part of what we all do in our business. This is one of those things. I think our horticulture and arboriculture is kind of one of those subjects that's a lot like computers. If it's not your major, you don't always feel comfortable working with it. So it's always good to have some expertise and just some experience and being able to work with people there. We work a lot with at my nursery with directly with cities like City of Mesa, City of Phoenix. We're one of the vendors for the Big Shade Initiative that's been going on, just started this past year, and will be going for the next 5. We also partner with SRP. We grow all the trees that are provided for homeowners that they offer up. So there's a lot of different ways we can kind of touch on improving that urban shade environment, and that's something we're pretty passionate about.
Thanks, Jeff. And yeah, what a great analogy there. I hadn't thought about it that way. Okay, and then Lora, my teammate here at the City of Phoenix. Good morning, and kudos on the green jacket for Earth Day. Lora, same prompting question for you. What do you do on a daily basis, and how did you wind up doing that job?
Hi, my name is Lora Martens. I'm the Urban Tree Program Manager for the City of Phoenix. We are in the City Managers department, which means we're kind of over every other department at the city. So we're supposed to coordinate all the other departments' work at the city, among a million other things that we're doing every day. My background, I have an undergraduate degree in environmental sciences from UC Santa Barbara. I used to work in nonprofits. I used to work for a foundation. I used to work, I have a bunch of jobs. But I went back to school at ASU for landscape architecture. And I graduated in 2011, and it was during the recession, and I just got a job. Like, I didn't get paid barely anything at all, but I work for this really great architect in Phoenix. His name is Steve Martino, and he basically developed the native plant industry for commercial development. He worked with Ron Gass, who's at Mountain States Nursery. I'm sure Jeff knows him. Yeah, so I worked for him for like at least 2 years. I've been basically working for him on the side for like 10 years now. He's just an amazing person. He's really grouchy, but he's a really amazing person. And I basically learned about the desert plants from him. I can't speak enough to the way he guided my direction in this field. So I worked as an architect, I got licensed, and then I had my own business at that point, and this job kind of came up, and I was like, that sounds really cool. So I applied for it. I kind of like, yeah, I advocated for myself with some of the tree people around, and I did get this job, and it's an amazing job. But we mostly, yeah, it helps because I worked in the construction field before this. I mean, I was a design and construction background, and I know everything about how a tree gets installed, which is in the urban forestry field. It's all about, the trees are not natural. They're totally, they get planted by humans. They basically, they get, if they die or they live, it's totally dependent on the people who care for them. So in the desert, I will say in the desert. So we have to work with people. I think one of the problems why the trees, sometimes they die, is when people don't pay attention to trees. So sorry, I can talk about this forever, but yeah, my background is I came from California. I'm in Arizona now, and I have this great, amazing job. So
Thanks, Laura, and thanks to everyone for putting a little personal touch on, I think as I read the academic papers, urban forestry can feel like an abstract concept, but hearing your personal stories and the role of mentors and happenstance and trusting your instincts, all interesting. Okay, I have a few questions to get the discussion going, but for our audience, as I mentioned before, the responsibility is really on you today to get the questions that you want answered from our panelists. So please consider me as just getting us warmed up here, and maybe we can start with Laura. We know the public is really interested to see urban forestry efforts succeed. The city of Phoenix is in the middle of its budget hearing process right now, and it's a safe bet that people are going to ask for more trees and shade as part of that process. We see scholars are writing about it and encouraging it. So lots of attention. But how are we doing, Laura, in central Arizona on a scale from hopeless to mission accomplished? Where do you think we are, and briefly why?
If it's like it's from 1 to 10, I think we're at 5, maybe. I mean, we're in the process to get some good stuff, and what we are doing is good, but I think we have a little bit to go from here. You know, at the city, we have like 12 different departments that manage trees at the city, and each department, they basically do their own thing. They do it differently. So the Parks Department, they do a pretty good job. They do a good job. So we're just trying to get the other departments to be at the level that the Parks Department is. As you know, David knows, we have a grant from the IRA grant,
Inflation Reduction Act.
Yes, I was like, what is? Oh yeah.
It might be taboo to say these days. I'm not
I
sure.
know, it's true. Yeah, we have $10 million we have to spend it in 4 years, and so yeah, from that perspective, I mean, we have so much money right now. Our biggest challenges is just to spend this money, and like, because of David and because we're so high profile, people are like always giving us more money. So I mean, it's a really amazing time to be in this field from my position. So, but we're just like, we're holding on, or just like going as fast as we can here. So
Great. All right. So I hear from Lora. It sounded like a +5 to me,
yeah,
right? I
yeah,
heard it's amazing time, but only 5. Steven, same question to you. Hopeless to mission accomplished. How are we doing it? And if you could justify your choice, that'd be great.
Sure, I'm gonna give it a hopeful 5 as well. So I'm new to the Valley. I've been here for about a year. Mesa's been planting trees since we do the Tree City USA every year. That really kind of collects the data of how many trees we're planting, how many trees we're losing, and Mesa has averaged 500 net new trees since 2010. We manage 33,000 trees, give or take. And we now have 5 arborists in our city. So we have this momentum, but just like Phoenix, just like other cities, our residents are asking for more. And I think it's new for our leaders. We're learning how to fund these initiatives, how to find funding. If Phoenix has any extra, send it our way. But we're leveraging community partners, and we're motivating the public to really participate. We're beginning to try to understand how to motivate businesses, and it's hopeful. It feels very hopeful.
Great. Thanks. Jeff, I have the same question for you, but as you respond, I wonder if you can provide some context for the audience of the public sector out of the total consumer base out there, thinking just about, and of course the cities are interested in urban forestry broadly speaking, but in terms of what we are directly managing in Phoenix, I think it's something like 100,000 out of 2 million total tree stems in the city. So I'm not even sure if the cities are big customers in the eyes of the Nursery Association. So when you answer the question, I'd love if you can talk about even this more macro perspective on all consumers, the total market, and how you think we're doing.
Well, sure. Obviously, yeah, I represent my own nursery tree land that I'm working with, but I've known a lot of the other major players for a long time, especially with my former connections in sales. I kind of got to know everybody. That's why I kind of naturally moved into the Nursery Association, because I was already friends or compatriots with a lot of those folks. So everybody's got a little different business model. Everybody's got a little different client base. But I think for the most part, cities are a huge part of our overall commerce, to say the least. We all love selling trees. That's what we're here to do. But we want to see people have success too. That's the long-term planning is. I probably put myself at a 5 or a 6 as we go for where we're at, moving towards hopefully getting things mission accomplished. Well, it's a living product, so it'll never be completely done, of course. I always go by the old adage, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant it is today. So that goes a long ways to kind of what we all want to do here. But no, I think for the most part, homeowners are very interested in getting trees. There's a lot of commercial development, certainly, and directly with the cities working. We work with a lot of the landscapers that plant for cities. So it's kind of hard to put an actual direct number on it, because there are so many different hands that are in the pot, so to speak, as far as who is planting what. But it's a pretty interesting thing, to say the least.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, and a reminder, I'm starting to see a couple of questions come in the chat, Matt. Some people are saying them directly to me in case you can't see them, but yeah, feel free to populate them in the chat. All right, so I'm encouraged by our first answer there. Thinking of some of the folks on the line, like Matt, who's a climate modeler, when they plant trees, they sort of type a couple of strokes on a keyboard and boom, we have 10% more trees, or they'll add an equation to their long line of computer code. But of course, the implementation is quite a bit different than that. And I think researchers like Matt and others have provided tremendous motivation for what the benefits would be to the urban climate system of tree planting. But I don't know, I'm skeptical from time to time that the academic side of the house doesn't appreciate all the nuance of implementation. So I wonder if each panelist might be able to share something surprising, or that might be surprising to this audience, that's holding us back. You all answered 5 to 6 out of 10. What's something surprising that's holding us back that other 4 to 5 points? where do we need a little bit of attention, or what might we not think about that is holding us back? And Stephen, maybe I'll throw the ball to you first on this one.
Sure. Yeah. For our Million Tree Initiative, we're going to try to plant 1 million trees by 2050. It's really planting irrigation, planting the water, and it takes time to lay new irrigation. When I think we always think like, oh yeah, we can just plant a tree in the park, it'll be fine. But we really need to have drip irrigation to every single tree, just as Laura was saying. We have to keep them alive here, even if the desert natives, if we don't get a lot of rain in these like harsh climate environments, they're struggling too. So we really need to lay drip irrigation. That depends on the flexibility and availability of our contractors, and that workforce development component, having knowledgeable folks who know how to install irrigation in kind of hard to reach places sometimes where we really need the shade. So for example, one of our parks, we installed, it's a lot of trees. It was one big foul swoop. We did 94 trees, but it took 4 to 5 weeks of planning to get the irrigation prepped, get the holes prepped, get all the equipment prepped for that 1 4-hour event. The aftermath's great, but I think the public may not realize how long in advance we have to plan, especially in a short planting season in Arizona.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Jeff, I heard workforce a little bit there. I heard the planning cycle. Other ideas, maybe surprises to the audience that are holding us back a little bit, or challenges in our region.
Well, I'll kind of bookend a little bit with what Stephen was saying there. The thing that a lot of folks don't think about is just the long-term survivability of these trees and the maintenance that's involved, and the infrastructure you need to have it. I mean, obviously, as a nursery industry, we love selling trees. That's what we're in business to do. But once again, we want to see success down the road, and these tree planting initiatives are great. It's good to see stuff planting, but I'm always a little hesitant to make sure that the infrastructure is involved there. To be able to keep things continuing on. That's such an important thing for the long-term maintenance. Even desert trees, you think of things like ironwoods and palo verdes and mesquites, super tough. They can survive here on rainfall, but that doesn't mean they can survive here on rainfall right out of the gate. A lot of times it takes 1.5 years to 2 years to really get trees well established. So that means not necessarily everyday watering, but regular watering schedules to get things adapted. And then some other things, especially out here in the East Valley, we've got a little greener palette, Mesa, Chandler, Gilbert. You see a lot more green trees, elms, and things like that aren't necessarily native, but are well adapted here, that might need a little more water. So they're going to need a little more supplemental care for all of it. And to kind of bookend in with that, education is such a huge part, once again, of what we need. The Nursery Association offers, we have an annual conference. It's called the Shade Conference, the Southwest Horticulture Annual Day of Education. Free plug. It's coming up August 15th here this year. But we try and integrate great speakers about talking about things like irrigation, things like tree health, a lot of arborists, plant and pest care, design. These are all different elements, and we all kind of have to work together. Landscape developers are very important in this process for putting in plans to where everything's going to go. And it's important that they're educated enough to know what mature sizes are and how big plants are going to be. So it's, right plant, right place. That's just the real key for what I see for what we need.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And thanks for the questions coming in. Please keep adding them. I'll pick, I'll pick as many as I can, and we will work to get answers to all the questions that come in. Matt, I'm thinking of how you're going to model these irrigation lines going in there. It seems to be really important. Laura, same question for you. What might be a surprise to the audience that's holding us back?
Those two gentlemen just stole the stuff I was going to say, but I will say that one of the main grants we have open right now is trees for homeowners, and the money must be spent in low income areas of the city, and they do not have drip irrigation. They just don't have it on their house, and and so we're working. There is other things we can do. We can make a swale that might capture some rainwater when it comes in, if it ever rains again. we do things like we give them a hose, we talk to them about how much they're supposed to water a tree with a hose. And I mean, we're trying other things because we need homeowners to plant trees to get to the tree canopy that we would like to see. And when we are working in these neighborhoods, they don't have drip. They don't. We have this weird thing in Phoenix. It's called flood irrigation, where they basically flood the city. I mean the SRP, the utility has a pipe and it floods the entire area. They're fine. I mean, they have flood, they're fine. But everyone else, they have to water the tree, and like when the tree is newly planted, they have to water that tree 3 to 4 times a week. So yeah, I would say water is our main concern right now.
Great. Thanks, Laura. All right, let's get into some of these excellent questions coming in from the audience. I'll try to prompt 1 or 2 of our panelists to respond to each of them. Of course, if anybody wants to weigh in, please, please jump in and do so. But we'll try to have just 1 or 2 responses to see how many of these questions we can get to. And I'd love to see if we can start a fight with the first question I see from the audience. A couple of audience members are asking for advice on species selection. Which species should we be planting? And then another question, what should we be thinking about when trying to make that decision? And Jeff, this might be a tricky question for you to answer because the salesperson may thinks we want to be pushing what's in stock, but surely you have more to say than that.
Well, yeah, yeah, obviously, sales is part of what we do, but once again, we're looking for people to have success. And kind of the interesting thing, I spent a long time at, like as I mentioned, Mountain States, which is out in the West Valley. And now that I'm working here in the East Valley, they're almost 2 completely different palettes. It's such an eye opener here. And then Laura was mentioning about some of the old downtown areas that are flood irrigated. That's a whole different area. So you've got to really know your site and what you're working with. And then you also have to kind of balance that with what's going to offer the most shade, kind of the most bang for your buck, the most shade for the least amount of water. Now, I'm all about native trees. They're kind of my passion, my favorites. But some things like Palo Verdes won't provide as much shade as an elm tree will, for instance, or an oak tree. Something that's going to be a little bigger canopy will provide more shade. So in the long run, it's going to give a bigger impact to the heat island effect. To reduce those things, but then you've got to also kind of balance that with the amount of water that you're going to use. So you can find some of those in-betweens, things like some of our native desert willow trees are probably my single favorite because they can adapt to the driest location and they can be planted in a park where they're getting flood irrigated. And either way, they'll really do fine. They just provide great color and good shade, 25, 30-foot size canopy. So they can kind of find the happy balance there. But yeah, it's always kind of a juggling act. You don't want your yard to stick out like a sore thumb for everybody else's that's in the neighborhood. I live in an old 1970s neighborhood, kind of like Laura was mentioning. And I actually don't have any irrigation on my yard at all. We've been in our house for 20 years. My trees pretty much survive on rainfall, and then I'll just supplementally water them with a hose at this point. So it can certainly be done. It's just a matter of knowing it. We were kind of talking about interesting statistics. I've heard that drip irrigation oftentimes can actually be more water intensive than just regular flood irrigation or sprinkler irrigation, just because a lot of folks aren't educated to be able to change their clocks and to be able to change with the seasons. Here it's such an important thing to change 3 or 4 times a year as the seasons go, because your water requirements in the summer when it's 110 are obviously way different than we're in the winter and it's 60, 70 degrees as a high. There's a lot of trees that can survive the winter on rainfall just fine, as long as we get a couple of decent storms. So that's a really important part of it too.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff and Matt. I think in our blast out to participants afterwards, maybe we can pull together some of the watering guidelines that have come from the community. I know Phoenix certainly has some from our water department. Jeff, you mentioned that you're a fan of native species, and I'm thinking back to right when I started with the city, and I had the chance to do a nursery tour with one of your colleagues, and I said something like, "Yeah, I think our boss is really interested in native trees," and your colleague pushed back. It's like, "Well, what do you really mean by that? Because we are innovating in the sector. We're putting trees out there today that are genetically similar to, but not identical to what grew here 100, 200 years ago." Can you give our audience a little bit of just a taste of what innovation looks like in creating trees for this landscape?
Sure, absolutely. And native, even just the term native itself is kind of a sticky subject, because is that native to our city? Is that native to our state? Is that native to the Southwest region? Is that native to our Sonoran Desert, which overlaps with the Chihuahuan Desert and Mojave Desert and the basins? So there's a lot of different ways of looking at that, but certainly innovation is a big part of it. I mean, the nursery industry, I think as a whole, we're always looking to try and find what's going to be most successful for people. And what's going to be most successful in the landscape. So a lot of that comes with breeding, selection. It can be something as simple as growing, 1,000 trees from seed, and you've got 2 that seem like they're performing really great. So you want to, focus on those couple, and then you can kind of grow those on, and then start by different ways of propagation, cloning those, so you can have a consistent, really uniform group from them. And then you can get into the other end of breeding hybrids, where you can start taking 2 different species that are similar and then crossing those. Some of the early pioneers, like Laura had mentioned, Ron Gass over at Mountain States, he was trying to work with folks like the Arboretum, and a lot of other educators that were bringing in plants and experimenting with things from Australia, from Africa. And at this point in the game, it doesn't seem, willow acacias and mulga acacias they almost feel like they're native, but they're from 11,000 miles away from here, down in Australia, and even specific areas of Australia. So it's up to the plant explorers to be able to go out and find these plants in nature that might be adaptable to other climates. I mean, I think of things, I know we're mostly focusing on trees, but you look at like shrubs, like our emu bushes that everybody uses, that really, like the valentines that have the pink flowers and the purpley flowering bluebells, emus, things that are really, really common, kind of ubiquitous in our landscape. Those all come from Africa, and from Australia, and we wouldn't have those if not for some of the early plant explorers that bring these things that are native adapted and are pollinator friendly. So it's kind of looking at the whole landscape as a whole.
Thanks, Jeff. And this is a good time to remind the audience there will be a quiz at the end to match the species with its area of origin. Stephen, I want to come to you in just a moment to talk about engaging young people. There are a couple of questions here, but before we get there, Laura, could you share with the audience the resource that the Urban Forestry Roundtable worked on that can help in this species selection conversation? I know that there was a work group that was thinking a lot about what are the factors we need to think about? What did they produce, and how can people find that?
Yeah, I can put a link in the chat. We worked on a tree species list. It's a tree species list, and it there's a lot of like categories that it divides the species into, like water use, maintenance, if they grow quickly or slowly, if they're tall or small. There's a lot of different factors in the list, and so I'll put it in the chat.
Thanks, Laura. And I know that Matt is going to wrap us up by asking some questions about the needs from the research community. But I do remember that as your team was working on, and the community is working on that list, understanding what the attributes of different species are, allergies, air pollution, water, a lot of the published research that's out there is not from our climate region. So I think we still have a gap in understanding how all of these attributes really play out in the real world in this region. Jeff, please jump in.
Well, I just wanted to kind of add in, along with Liz Laura's talking about the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, or AMWA. It's a kind of a congregation of most of the cities here within our urban area in the Phoenix metro area. They've put together, and I've worked alongside with a lot of the folks over there. They've put together a fantastic reference. They've got they call it the Pink Book. It's a publication, you can see it's online as well, that really helps with that plant selection when looking for things that are native or native adapted, good xeric, low water use plants.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, and this sometimes I hear the chatter about we need the list of the lists for folks to know what all the lists are, and which lists have a regulatory component, which do not, which are based on which factors. But yeah, thanks so much, Jeff, for that. Okay, Stephen, when you were describing your path into this job, I got a sense of a service-minded young person who's looking to do good in the world. And we have a couple of questions related to youth engagement. And I'm not sure how to bundle them together elegantly, but a couple of the interesting points I see. One is we've talked about homeowners a lot today, but where we are in terms of housing affordability, it makes it hard for a young person to get engaged in urban forestry by planting a tree in their front yard because they may not be likely to buy a house, may not be interested to buy a house, you know, now or in the foreseeable future. So so how do we think about young people engagement from that front? And then I also see, you know, just youth education in general, and a couple of questions that come in. What can we do to inspire people not just to be advocates for this work, but actually do the work that is sometimes, you know, really grueling and thankless, as I've come to learn. So sorry, I'm throwing a couple of, you know, loosely connected questions at you there, but I'm sure you have some great advice for us.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, David. I got maybe 4 things of advice here. First off, let's say you don't have a home. A lot of cities have tree funds, so you can donate. Maybe your company can donate to the park fund, and that'll plant a tree at your closest park. Next, you can attend a mayor and council meeting and advocate for. I see it pop up in the chat and the questions. We need people to show up and say, look, we need to properly fund our tree programs to maintain and care for our trees. Those are free events. You learn about the civic engagement process. And I've learned that if I bring in someone else to say the same thing I'm saying, it is much more well received than from a city employee. And then this past year, we do distribution events. We've modeled it off the SRP program, but I'm learning through some of our other opportunities that people do want to plant trees in the valley. So I'm really looking next year to create more opportunities for people to come out, volunteer, get their hands dirty, learn how to plant trees. And by doing that, whether that's at a home, at a park, on a street, we're increasing our urban canopy. And our last shout out is Arizona Sustainability Alliance. They are hosting, it is the Mesa, it's the Tree Stewards program, but it's taking place in Mesa. It's a free program. It's 2 weekends. And then you also commit to planting 100 trees somewhere in Mesa. So it's a crash course in the basics of arboriculture and planting. And then you get to design the planting event alongside their staff, a few other staff members in the area, and myself. That we just had an event on this past Saturday, and we planted, let me see if I can get it right. I believe it was approximately 75 trees, 30 at a school, and then the rest were across the neighborhood that surrounded the school. We had all ages come out and participate. So I think everyone in the valley is building programs to engage youth, to engage young adults, to engage everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. Matt, I'm going to try to do 2 more questions before we hand it off to you for a synthesis and a final one. Let's see. We will come to the water question, which I'm sure you all have thought about before. Well, maybe now is a good time to get to the water one, because that might be a long answer. Before we get to that question, though, I did want to just reflect, Stephen, on the point you made that I think was so important for every member of this audience to hear, is that our voice alone as champions and advocates for these efforts inside City Hall is not enough. I think, you know, we are uniquely positioned to be drivers of change, but 2 or 3 people coming to a meeting on a random weekday afternoon to echo, amplify, or challenge what we're saying can make all the difference in the world. So I think we can all reflect on what, you know, one of the ways we can close that gap between the optimistic 5 to 6 and 10 that we described before is just be sure that our voice is heard. That's been a really surprising part of my learning in the city job, is how important that affirmation is from the community. So thanks so much for bringing that up. All right. You know, a question that I suspect my colleagues answer almost every day in some form or another. Jeff, how are you trying to sell and plant all these trees when we don't have any water here in the Phoenix area? Aren't you making this problem worse?
Boy, it's a sticky wicket sometimes. You know, it's kind of one of those things. I don't think people, they're certainly not from the area, realize quite how well maintained and well managed our infrastructure with water and our aquifers is here in Phoenix. This goes back to President Theodore Roosevelt and the construction of the Roosevelt Dam, which turned this city in the span of 30 years from, I think, something to the tune of like 30,000 residents to 300,000 residents. And then the subsequent other infrastructure that's been put along the Salt River Basin, the Verde River Basin, and then obviously we're also working with Central Arizona Project, getting water from the Colorado. So we actually are pretty good shape with water. That's not to say everybody go turn their faucets on at home and start sprinkling everything, but we try and find that happy medium. And shade is a very important part of that as well. You know, the urban heat island effect. I've lived in Phoenix since I was 4, so I've been here for over 40 years. I've kind of watched the city grow, and I remember when I used to live off of Greenway Road in the north end of the valley, and that was out in the sticks, and now there's city for 20 miles beyond that. So we've increased, and that urban heat island effect of all the concrete and asphalt that we put into our development has continued to grow, and it's affecting our weather patterns. You can see how it's changed the monsoons over the years. You can see that big wall of heat almost out in the East Valley where usually the storms would come from and you know, crash over our city. Well, it takes such a huge storm to be able to do that nowadays that we don't get quite the same frequency. So one way we can mitigate that is by planting trees to reduce some of that heat island effect and to lower some of those reflective heat temperatures. The more trees that we have, the lesser that effect is, the more normalized we can get back to. You know, you can never have it back like it used to be, but we can always get it better and get to a situation where it's a more livable situation. I think Stephen mentioned how, you know, planting a tree can help, you know, in your front yard will help reduce your energy bills and your air conditioning bills. And that's absolutely true. I can see it in my own front yard. I've got 4 or 5, you know, native trees or native adapted trees that provide enough shade that I can be out there and be comfortable even when it's 115. It's not a big deal. I can drag my hose around. So a lot of it's just, once again, education, making sure people understand what trees actually need for water. There's a lot of landscapes out there that are getting overwatered just because maybe people don't quite really think, oh, more water is always good. Well, it's not always the case. It's trying to find that good balance. Once again, AMWA's got a really good directive out there. Smartscape's another good program that's kind of lets people know what sort of water requirements are necessary to be able to build up correct schedules for those irrigation situations. So you can provide adequate water, keep trees happy without really being wasteful too.
Thanks, Jeff. Stephen, maybe in just 30 seconds or so, what gives you confidence that a million tree initiative in Mesa won't break the Mesa water bank?
Sure.
Or do you know? You know, I guess, you know, do you know even?
You know, I lean on the Forest Service. There's that one article, academic article by Nowak and Greenfield that just says desert cities can sustain 15% urban canopy. So I lean on that research. For me, it's often helping homeowners realize our desert trees only need in Mesa, about $5 a year to water their trees and keep them alive. So when, you know, economically it can be pretty tough right now, but getting that tree in your yard watered for the first several years can really offset your electric bill later, and that small investment now is worth it. So that's my message for watering
Laura,
trees.
yeah, thanks, Stephen. Laura, anything to add on this question? If not, I can go to you for the lightning round final question before I hand it to Matt.
Yeah, they said everything I would say.
Perfect, thanks. And we'll be sure to share some resources with the group. Okay, one more question. Sienna, we're not going to give it justice, but I'd love to hear just 1 or 2 words from each of our panelists here. I suspect we all agree that at least certain places or types of properties have challenges with tree survival rate in our region. And Sienna mentioned a specific number. I'd be curious to learn where that number came from, because I'm not aware that there's a lot of survival rate data that really exists from our community. But regardless, survival rates aren't where we want to be. What is the #1 factor holding us back for tree survival 5 or 10 years down the road? Laura, what comes to mind first for you?
I mean, it's funny to go first. I think that we need the research, actually. I don't think we know why trees die here. I mean, I would say, I mean, what I think about when the trees die in the first couple years after they're planted, because that's when they're the most like success, like they're gonna die in that first couple of years. I think we can do something about that. It's basically like bad maintenance at that point. Also being planted incorrectly, which you actually can incorrectly plant a tree. I didn't know that actually before I took this job. So that's, I mean, it all comes down to people and the way they care about the trees. Yeah.
All
But
right, so I think if I were to try
need-
to distill it, I think I heard people as the reason that's holding us back. Stephen, let's go to you.
I agree with Laura. Definitely people. See a lot of weed whackers hit our park trees. Putting my arborist hat on though, and tree risk assessment hat, I think heat's really challenging our trees. Mulch everything. We're seeing a lot of reflective heat just burn the base of trees are cracking. It looks funky. So providing that habitat for the tree to survive, or that space for the tree to survive. So mulch it.
Great. Jeff?
I tend to go maintenance is necessary, but low maintenance too. I think there's a tendency for people to want to over shear things and just trim everything back really hard and then get all that material off. Well, there's some good to just letting plants grow to a certain extent, removing damaged limbs or bad crossing situations like that, but otherwise just let it go. And the more organic material you can leave, even if it's covering over your rocks, the better, because that does nothing but, just as Stephen was saying, it's mulch. That's free mulch. It's work you don't have to do and money you don't have to put into it. It's the tree's doing it for itself, but I think a lot of times we kind of remove it. Yeah, tree stewardship, it comes down to people. You have to have the want to be able to have something grow. And that's why I think we see a lot of failure. Sometimes people get really excited about these initiatives and get stuff planted up, and then 2 years later you come back and it's crickets. You don't see anybody that's there wanting to keep that tree kicking along.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And with that, I'm happy to hand it back to Matt for a final question and synthesis, as we have about 2.5 minutes remaining. Matt, I've learned a lot about the implementation of urban forestry today. I hope you have as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. And thank you to all the panelists. I'm going to probably take a step back on the synthesis at this point. There's been so much wonderful information. I would almost appreciate the opportunity to watch this video again. And it's fantastic that it's being recorded, because we all will have the opportunity to watch this video again. And thank you for all of the links that have been provided. Great reading material by the panelists, by you as well, Dave. I'd like to close it off with one question. And I'm going to preface this by saying that the Urban Climate Research Center is very unique in a sense. The leadership team, 9 faculty members and 1 student, are very diverse in their particular disciplines and their disciplinary focus and their scientific expertise. There's 4 of them here on this call, myself included. Dave is one of them. I'm not going to call out anybody else unless they would like to speak up. But this has been brought up by each of the panelists in some way, but I'd like for maybe a more explicit representation about what sort of research, given that we're here in the Valley of the Sun, Arizona State University, depending on how you do the numbers, how you crunch the numbers, largest university in the United States. If you were to ask, let's say, the Urban Climate Research Center or any other unit at ASU, depending on what your research question is, what do you need from the scientific community to maybe progress forward? And this has been brought up by some of the questions in the chat, to progress from, let's say, a 5 to maybe a 6 or 7 or an 8. And how can this become sustainable moving forward? I realize that's kind of a loaded question. If each one of the panelists can take no more than 1 minute for that, I think that
or maybe 15 seconds given the clock, Matt.
True.
We'll see if they can do it. Yeah, Jeff, maybe you can go first. Needed research is
Needed research, I think, is survivability rates. Just as Laura had mentioned, it's one of those things that we really don't have much data as far as survivability goes. And just ensuring that we've got the long-term success of trees is totally based upon the maintenance and the irrigation to get that tree started, and then the continuation of that and as it progresses through its life cycle.
awesome. Thanks, Laura.
I would say, how many trees are we supposed to be planting in the desert? Steven said he had 15%, but you know, I would like someone else to take a crack in that number, so. And where
Yeah.
the trees should go in.
Great. And Stephen.
Yeah, where are my economists out there? I need cost benefit analyses
Oh,
for
nice.
if we remove asphalt. I have to show my streets department like a GSI, Green Stormwater Infrastructure chicane is worth it. So please help me out.
Nice. Awesome. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. I want to thank you once again, Stephen and Laura and Jeff and Dave. Thank you for your thoughts and for your different perspectives. I want to take this opportunity to thank all our participants. Fantastic discussion in the chat room. Apologies, we weren't able to get to all of the questions. Dave did a great job in trying to combine questions to get as many of them answered. Of course, this is just the start of the conversation, and we hope to continue this conversation, perhaps a forum in the future, maybe in the fall semester, to get more engagement and increase the dialogue. With that said, I want to thank everybody once again for participating in this distinguished webinar series hosted by the Urban Climate Research Center at Arizona State University. Hope to see you all at a nearby tree near all of us very soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Matt. Take